So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for making us part of your day. This collision of culture, a part of your day. It means a lot to me. Those of you who are listening, I know who you are. You're busy people, and I appreciate the fact that you're here. And I do my best to bring to you individuals who are great people to make your listening interesting. And today is going to be no exception. We have a great podcast coming. If you like what you hear, by the way, we appreciate if you would share it with others, pass it on, talk about it. We're building an audience. We're actually building an audience. It's actually kind of very gratifying for me to see what's happening out there. But we're building an audience, and I want to build an audience not to be famous, but to highlight the people I bring on this show. And today, it is a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Sue Chan. She is a veterinarian. She lives in Vacaville, California. She has a little farm. But Sue is recently authored a book that we're going to talk about. It's called The Whisperer's Way. So Dr. Sue Chan, it's a pleasure to welcome you today to the Hamilton Review.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's really a pleasure. Dr. Chan began her education at UC Berkeley. She got a degree in dual degree in zoology and geology. Then she went over to UC Davis and got her veterinarian's degree there at UC Davis, and ultimately went on and got a master's in preventative veterinary medicine. So she's got plenty of degrees behind her name. And more recently, she has founded a nonprofit organization called CETA, which that means the California Education Through Animals. Dr. Sue Chan, you're a busy woman.
Very busy.
You've done a lot of very cool things. So I'm going to step away from the microphone, and I'm going to have you take over and just tell us a little bit about your life, your journey in life, where you began, the points, what I call the inflection points that cause you to go one way or the other way, and ultimately, we're going to talk about your book, The Whisperer's Way. So, Dr. Chan, the microphone is yours.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Well, I grew up in El Cerrito, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, in a Chinese family. And the Chinese are not.
By the way, excuse me, is that a rooster in the background? Do
yes.
I hear? Yeah, it is a rooster. Okay, I was just wondering if that was one of your.
It's real. We have lots of them.
Okay, that's fine. No, I just want people to know that Sue does live on a farm up in Northern California in near Vacaville. And those are real roosters in the background. So I just want to make sure that people understand the context that we're hearing these noises.
Okay. Sorry I hope it's not too distracting. Yeah, I really live on a ranch in Vacaville. I have 20 acres here. We have sheep and cattle and horses and a lot of chickens. And so this is Phoenix Ranch, and I started it here about 20 years ago. And then we went nonprofit 15 years ago. So as CETA Foundation. And I gathered all these animals so that I could teach people. One, I learned from them. And our motto is ask the animals, for they will teach you, which is Job 12:7. And I've learned a lot about the animals just interacting with them. And then I introduce them to people so that they can interact with them for therapy and to learn. And so I come from a culture that doesn't really understand animals as sentient sentient beings. They're mostly animals used for food, and so they didn't have that sensitivity that most Americans have. And so, but even in America, as a clinician, I saw how people who love their animals still lacked understanding how animals think and work, and it caused a lot of unnecessary suffering for both the animals and their owners. And so, as a veterinarian, I started the veterinary outreach to sort of bridge that gap. And also, the other reason I wrote this book was because I grew up in a family with ADD. My father had Asperger's, and then I had ADD, and my son has ADD. And we're all high functioning, but it caused us a lot of distress. And my mother didn't know how to deal with me or my father, and so there was a lot of arguing and fighting in the family. And I wish that now looking back, if she had some guidance, we could have avoided a lot of the troubles we had. Um, and so over the years, I learned that I was really good at working with special needs kids. I was a tutor in high school with special needs kids. And with CETA Foundation, worked, I brought a lot of foster kids onto the ranch. And I had a close relationship with Progress Ranch, was a group home. And then also I worked as a shelter veterinarian, and I was able to work with animals that would have been put to sleep because they were too aggressive or too fearful. And so I did a lot of rehab that way, and I developed my techniques with of working with animals. And so I felt like this information is just really important to get out there, because these are things that I wasn't seeing written in books. And so I also saw that animals and children were emotionally or psychologically damaged by well-meaning people who were using techniques that they had learned, but weren't necessarily appropriate for those particular situations. And I just really wanted to help alleviate that kind of unnecessary suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that your comment that they are sentient beings. I mean, certainly. So, what Dr. Chan, I see a lot of animals in my neighborhood. In fact, I see more puppy dogs than I see children in my neighborhood. I'm amazed. Sometimes I actually count the number of dogs I see when I go through the neighborhood to go to my office, which is a mile and a half away, and I count like 10, 15 doggies, out for their walk. And so it does seem that there is that sense of that dogs and cats to a degree as well certainly touch a nerve in people. And but I think you're talking about more like horses and other animals like cattle and things like that. Is that what you're referring to? Because I do see that fidelity to smaller animals, certainly puppy dogs. People love these dogs; they go crazy over them, and I know that for a fact because we have had dogs in our family, particularly two pugs that have now passed on to eternity. But they were, I think, they were more beloved than some of the people in our family. But anyway, that's maybe too much information there. But what exactly do when you talk about sentient animals? What does that mean to you?
Well, all animals have a sentience about them. They have a consciousness. Um, and uh, it's like people do bond with their horses and their sheep. And I mean, all the animals on my ranch are basically my family members at this point. And it's even though some of them are used to be sold for food, I still have that emotional bond, and I want to make sure that when I send them off, they're going to the best possible. And so and it's a different level than most people have who are in this line of work. Um, and so yeah, pretty much everything has consciousness. And so it depends on how you want to um, acknowledge that. Um, and so it's most. I think everybody understands that there's a consciousness. It's how much you want to accommodate that part of these beings,
Yeah.
and how much you want to be sensitive to what their needs are.
Yeah, no, I think that we're, as human beings, I mean, I think we're called, I mean, morally, we're called to be, firstly, kind to animals. That's actually a biblical concept, too. I mean, you know that historically, the Hebraic custom of Shabbat was not to work your animals on the Sabbath day as well.
Mm.
By definition, you didn't work yourself. That was part of the day of a holiness. It was a time of rest. And then you didn't work the animals either, so they got to take a day off as well. So that concept of being of morally aware of the animals is something very, very deep, I think, and historically, certainly a concept that people have held for the millennia. But you're talking about almost like a deeper awareness of their feelings. Is that what you're saying?
Um, it's more of a sensitivity. I think people are aware of their feelings, but then to understand what they're think- it's more of understanding what they need.
Yeah.
And it actually extends to people, interhuman relationships too, where people um are do things that upset you, and you try to um, address issues. And so it's just kind of that understanding it's hard to explain, but there's a lot of people who love their animals and love their children, and then they end up doing things that are really damaging, but it's not intentional. And so
Yeah.
my book is trying to explain things, all these things about behavior and psychology and um, physical needs and neurophysiology. So I address those levels as well, so that there's this insight that people have that generally isn't out there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. I think that people don't they may have kind of sense it maybe, but they don't know the details of it. So, um, okay, listen, we are going to take a 1 minute break here, Dr. Chan.
Okay.
We're going to get into your book in 1 second. The book again is called The Whisperer's Way. We're going to talk about that book and how to access that book in 1 minute. So, friends, don't go away. You're listening to the Hamilton Review.
The Hamilton Review podcast is brought to you by Hamilton Babies, 9 kid-friendly products designed for the little loves in your life. Find them at hamiltonbabies.com or amazon.com. Also consider Dr. Hamilton's recently published book, 7 Secrets of the Newborn, available at Barnes & Noble, your local independent bookstore, and amazon.com.
So, friends, welcome back to the Hamilton Review. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Sue Chan. She's a doctor of veterinary medicine. She lives up in Vacaville on a farm. You'll hear the roosters. And Sue, you know, this book, The Whisperer's Way, is something that just you felt compelled to write. And we talked about this book. I want you to kind of share a little bit more detail. But one of the things that you mentioned about one of the aspects of the Whisperer's Way is this concept of unconditional love. Now, we talk about that certainly in terms of human beings and our children and other people in our families and other folks. We talk about you have to love people unconditionally. And I've never really actually heard this applied to animals per se. So can you maybe clarify your thoughts about that, and what does it mean to really love unconditionally?
Okay. The term unconditional love, yeah, it's sort of a term that's bantered around a lot, and I thought a lot about it. Um, and I realized that it applies really well to um, what the teachings of Jesus was, and how he applied it. And so there's some basic points. One was, don't take anything anyone does or say as a personal attack. Um, Sometimes it's not about you, it's about them. There's something going on inside them, and so just step back and take it as just sort of an impersonal action. Another one is, don't do anything as a punishment. Um, there's a concept called restorative justice, where you don't label this person who's acting out as a bad person. So it's like, you step away from judging them, but rather give them a chance to fix what they broke. Um, and so that's getting away from the punishment aspect of trying to address a problem. Then you have to be empathetic. You put yourself in their shoes and see that from their perspective why they're acting a certain way. Is it a physical problem? Is it from a bad past experience they had, so that now they're reacting a certain way? Is it something they learned from somebody else? Um, so it's you sort of are able to troubleshoot and get to the root of the problem that way. And then you also have to set your own boundaries too, and not be a doormat and take the attacks. So it's not, unconditional love doesn't mean let them beat you up. It's like you stop the actions and step aside
Yeah.
until the attack stopped. Yeah. So
And you also mentioned you can't react in anger.
right, never react in anger. The one of the horse trainers I work with, he he used to do things, and those horses would just freak out and do all sorts of crazy things and buck, and he just was totally cold, non-expressive, didn't do anything, and it was really interesting to watch. That's what really drove it home for me. Is like, wow, it's sort of like this master, Zen master, watching everything go on, and then finally the horse calms down.
Yeah.
Because if you react in anger, then they react, it escalates, and
Sure.
so you can't
Yeah.
do that.
And
So
and you also, when we talked about this, you mentioned this concept of not giving up, that you need to persevere and be willing to work through these issues. Um, what does that look like practically for you? Are we talking about horse training here? Are we talking about just any of your, like if sheep or what? I mean, are animals, I guess I have a question for you. Are animals capable of really reforming? Can you actually take an animal that has had trauma of some kind and actually reform them to the point where they're docile and they like you, I guess you could say?
oh, definitely. Well, it's just like with people. It's the same concept. You have to just know how to do it, and um, like you say, you just can't give up because there's always something that you can fix it. Now, whether or not you want to take it on for safety reasons is another issue, but there's always a way to address something. You have to get to the root of the problem, though, and that's
Yeah.
the key. And not give up until you find the root of the problem.
What are some of the roots? What are some of the roots that you're talking about? Are you talking about like an abused dog or an animal that has just been beaten
Oh,
or
well, no,
or
they could.
starved, or what kind of things are you referring to?
Oh, it could be. Well, it's just like us. If you're not feeling good, you react. You're grouchy, right? And so, if they're not feeling good for any reason, they might be sick, they might be hungry, they might be tired, they might be too hot. They get grouchy and they'll not cooperate. Um, the other thing is might not understand what you want. And then you keep pushing and they still don't understand. Then they get frustrated and react badly. It could be aggression, it could be avoiding you, or it could be not doing what you ask them to do. So these are all considered, you know, bad actions, or, people will label them as bad. And it's, it's because you haven't really figured out what's wrong with them. So it could be another interesting thing is sometimes you physically might remind them of somebody who did something bad to them, and they will react to you. Like, say, my I've had animals, like recently, my sheep, um, didn't. We rounded up some sheep, and the guy who was helping me do it was wearing a plaid shirt and he was blonde. Um, and so that afternoon, sorry, it's a different phone. I have too many phones. Um, then and so that afternoon, an intern came, and he looked kind of like this fellow, and the ram came up from behind and tried to knock him over, which was really strange because he'd never done that before. And so just the physical appearances um, can cause certain reactions. I have a new dog, and she just gets so excited when my friends come visit who have they're sort of dark complexion, Asian or Mexican, and have short hair, because the grandma in the family she came from was Mexican and had short hair. So it's really kind of interesting. Um, so behavior is really kind of deep in my book. I go into all these different aspects that can maybe help you figure out why they're acting in a
why
certain
they're
way.
doing what they're doing. No, I think
Right.
that, people do, I mean, human beings, we certainly, if people look like people that we like, we kind of like them, or we kind of feel like we know them even
Right.
before we really do know them. They resemble other people. And sometimes those people who we like that these people resemble will take a shine to them as opposed to just having the other reaction too. It's interesting that animals can actually. I guess that makes sense to me. It really does. If someone looks like someone who abused an animal, that would certainly bring out certain responses from that animal, whatever kind of animal it is. You have a number of practical calming techniques. And by the way, I'm thinking we're going to get, friends, to a very important question about the idea of kids and culture, because I want to talk to Dr. Chan. But before we get to that, I just want to finish off. And those of you who have puppy dogs or have other animals, this is very applicable. But you talk about calming techniques. What are some of the things these are practical things that you employ? What are those?
Oh, okay. There's a lot of physical things you can do, like how you swaddle babies. That deep pressure calms them, and you can do the same thing with animals. And so, like when I'm working with an animal that's really stressed out, I'll wrap them up in a towel, and and that calms them, and they'll stop struggling. Now you have to be careful that they still can breathe and the towel's not too tight, and that you don't get bit. So it's kind of tricky, but I do it with horses. I do not with horses, but with birds, cats, dogs, any chickens. Just the deep pressure calms them down and makes them more cooperative. The other thing is massages. You can rub them in their happiest places. I call it with horses. It's like under their elbows or on their neck. With dogs, you know, up by the behind the, on the back by the tail. They'll start thumping their feet, things like that. So uh, there's, I mean, the book, I've got like pages and pages of techniques with sheep. If you sit them on their bottoms, it triggers baroreceptors. This is a lot of it's triggered by the vagal response.
Yeah.
The polyvagal system is what really opened my eyes. When I learned about that, it really opened my eyes to what the mechanisms were. Like one of the tricks that the horse trainer used was he'd get the horses to lay down. It was kind of by force, and the horses didn't like it. But once they were down, they go into like a stupor, and it was like they're sedated. And then you could start doing all sorts of things to desensitize them while they're under the sedation. And so when they woke up, they wouldn't get freaked out by things anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what they call bomb proofing. And so he would always one trainer would do that before we'd take the horses out on the street with the carts. And it was amazing because he did it to 4 of my horses. And all these horses went out on the streets within 2 months, and we were cruising through the neighborhoods of Vacaville and over freeway overpasses and through traffic with these horse carts and me driving, and I'm a novice. So
Wow.
it's really profound.
Amazing. You also talk about how music has a calming effect on animals.
Yeah, it does. You can play music and certain music, and cows will give more milk, and chickens will lay better eggs, things like. And there's growth, and you can just sort of feel the vibe. And it's like if you teach yourself to be sensitive, you can feel the energy that animals are exuding, whether they're tense or whether they're relaxed, and just like with people. And you try to get them calm. And one of the things that's key too is you also have to be calm and have no fear. Because if you go into a situation and you're fearful or angry, um, the animals are going to react in kind. And so you have to calm yourself. And a lot of these techniques that I call whisperers tricks are calming techniques that release oxytocin. And you can use them on yourself too, so that like when you're stressed, I use a lot of these techniques, like the deep breathing techniques, um, and then like rubbing your eyeballs and things like that to trigger the vagal response and trigger relaxation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, no,
yeah.
that's good. And I'm fascinated by the music. What kind of music do they like? Are they classical buffs? Do they like heavy metal?
Oh,
These cows who
I think
produce more
it
milk.
it varies. It varies. It's like the people, right? It's like some people like heavy metal and some people like classical, and so you just have to see what works for them.
That's very funny. Okay, the big question I have for you. Okay, you are immersed in animals, and you're talking to me in a way that I almost feel like you're talking about humans, not animals, but you're talking about animals and the techniques you use on them to calm them and make them have them want to do and like you, I guess, and have them do what you want them to do. Um, why is it important? My subtitle is "Where Kids and Culture Collide." Why is it important, or in your mind, that children be exposed to animals? What is that thing that happens when kids have a puppy or they're care for chickens or whatever? What can you share with us some of those thoughts?
Well, I think that I'm sure there's a vagal trigger that happens when you're interacting with animals. Um, I've seen where, the actual feeding of animals by hand triggers an interesting response. I wrote about this in my book where I had people come to my ranch, and one was an engineer who was here to consult on some building, and he saw my sheep, and then he found I told him, oh yeah, the sheep like mulberry leaves, so he fed him a couple mulberry leaves, and he got so excited he climbed up on a picnic table and got more mulberry leaves to give to the sheep. Yeah, and so it's like here's an elderly gentleman doing all this. And the same with a minister um, that came to visit. He's kind of formal and everything. And then he brought his kids to see the ranch, and we were just chatting. And then when it got to time to feed the animals, he just was beside himself. He just like couldn't get enough carrots to give to the horses because every time they took one from his hand, he just got all excited about it. And so, yeah, and then, just petting animals. It's been shown that when you're petting an animal, it calms people. So there's this vagal thing. And then also with this vagal response, you develop, the oxytocin release, which is social bonding and pro-social behavior. And so animals develop, well, some children are more, open to this, especially people on the autism spectrum are more sensitive to this. Uh, but anybody can benefit from it. So, and then it teaches you empathy and you know and then also caring for their needs. And I think having an animal and caring for an animal on that level teaches people how to care for other people as
Yeah.
well.
No,
And
I think that can be extrapolated into later on. I have to say that people who grow up on farms kind of understand the nature of life, I think, in a different way. And my observation is that kids who've grown up with a lot of animals, dogs, or whatever it may be, when they become parents, they approach it differently. They have a little bit of there's a little bit of empathy that I think, and they also kind of have that sense of familiarity. And I'm not saying that you're a better parent or not, but they seem like they've almost like, oh yeah, I know what to do. I have that. There's a sense of confidence maybe that engenders in
yeah,
people. That I think people who come to this de novo without any experience prior to caring for animals don't have quite that leg up, if you will. Um, okay, well, friends, the name of this book is called The Whisperer's Way. Dr. Chan, how do you find this book?
oh, you can find it on Amazon. So yeah, if you just Google Whispers Way, it'll show up, or Sue Chan D.V.M. We're on Amazon now.
That's wonderful. And Sue Chan is spelled Sue, S-U-E, and C-H-A-N, and she's a doctor of veterinary medicine. And how can people find out about CETA? Because this is interesting too.
Okay, I have a website. I still actually need to update it, but it's called www.asktheanimals.net.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What was it? Say that again.
Ask the Animals.
Oh, Ask the Animals. Okay, asktheanimals.net. Okay, beautiful. And all right. Well, and do you receive visitors up there on your ranch in Vacaville?
I right now I can't because I'm by myself taking care of everything, and I don't have time for that right now. I'm hoping that with time, now that the book is done, and after we're dealing with a lot of storm damage, and there's just all this stuff that I have to take. Like yesterday, I got my golf cart stuck in the mud. I had to drag it out with the tractor by myself. Just all these challenges that you don't have in city life. But so eventually, if people want to keep in touch with me, I have a Facebook page, CETA Foundation Phoenix Ranch. That's Facebook, and I'll try to be posting more on there too. Or if they want to send me their email address through the asktheanimals.net information, and I can put you on a mailing list and send out updates. But yeah, I was hoping to start programs where we have kids come on the ranch and on a regular basis to work with the animals, or like I have a room full of wool that could be used for crafts. I think it's really important for kids to learn how to work with their hands, and just actually ranch life is just really good for people. I think it's taught my kids a lot about the work ethic and having fun outside, doing things as a group, working together. It's a good experience. There's always something.
No, there's no question about it. And I think that I would encourage you, if I can say this, to definitely pursue that, because I'd love to be able to bring busloads of kids from LA up to your little Phoenix ranch up there, Sue Chan, and have them experience what you're experiencing, which sounds wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to leave it at that. Dr. Sue Chan, thank you for taking the time to be on the Hamilton Review today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are totally welcome. Friends, pick up her book, The Whisperer's Way. It's on Amazon. And until next time, thank you for listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. And until next time, be well, be safe, and be encouraged. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.